It is now time to elevate.
Time to motivate them.
Let's engage. It is now time to elevate.
Hey everyone. Thanks so much for staying tuned in for another episode of Engage, Motivate, and Elevate with your host, Monet Fox. Today we have such a great show for you, so I'm happy that you stayed here. We have Mr. Byron Beaman. He's a football coach and a youth mentor in the Boston area. He's such a great spirit and good energy, a positive person to speak to. Super excited about today's show, and I know you will be too. So help me in welcoming Byron Beaman to Engage, Motivate, and Elevate. So everybody, please help me welcome Byron Beaman. Byron, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Sure, thank you for having me.
No, I appreciate you, man, so much. So let's go right into it. Let's talk about it because you are from Boston, originally born and raised. So let's first start off with giving a little bit of backstory, where you came from, what area, and most importantly, when you were going through your teenage years, like once you started like going out into the streets, hanging out with your friends and stuff, who were your biggest, most memorable influences, both positive and negative? So I want to kind of dive into some of the challenges that you were met with.
Okay, well, I grew up in Mattapan, 02126. I mean, love the place. I know it has a reputation of being something different than what it was when I grew up there. And a lot of the people that I grew up with are responsible for a lot of that reputation, but at the same time, we all love where we're from. You know what I mean? It made us to the people that we are today. And suffice it to say, a lot of my friends that I grew up with are really working hard in the community, trying to make things different, coaching Pop Warner football, working with gang-involved kids, just like really doing that work. Like all that work is being done by people from the community, And if you look at who's doing this work,
to do the work, we all came from it. We understand what the problem is, right?
Absolutely. So all the people that are doing this work, like I sit back and think about it, I'm like, wow, like all these people are legitimately from my neighborhood. Like straight up, like, okay, he used to live over here, he lived over there, he lived up the street in the bricks. You know what I mean? It's like everybody knew each other anyway, but we were doing different stuff at that time.
Right.
But we're doing similar work, but in just in different places. But the work is similar. And it's funny how that influence of that community had on everybody. Yeah. It's really wild to me. Like to the point where every year there's a big cookout in the neighborhood that everybody comes back to. And it's like, this is wild because, we weren't supposed to live to be 50.
Yeah.
We were supposed to be dead at 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Oh, shoot, they made it to 21. Let's up that limit. Now it's 25, Right. So now it's just one of those things where the things that were put in front of us, right? We had choices to make. And at that time, when you're living in a situation where maybe you don't have the means or the money to get the things that you want, but you're presented with this opportunity to have it, like, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand the motivation.
Yeah.
I can dig that because
One thing I just want to interrupt you really quickly because I feel like a lot of people that have grown up in less than ideal circumstances, I'll say we, because I grew up in that same circumstance, try to do it, it's tricky, right? We want other people to have an understanding. So there's a level of education, but it's something that we get, I feel like, and I have these kinds of conversations with friends of mine all the time. It's like some people do things because they want to be vicious and wild and crazy. Some people do things out of necessity. Some people are trying to take care of their little brothers and sisters because their moms wasn't doing well growing up or they didn't have the meat, So I feel like, the intent for a lot of people out here was mostly out of growing up, our generation I'm talking about. It was mostly necessity. It's different now, where these kids are out here just, doing things. I think it's different, but maybe it's not. I'm not in the streets now. So, but when I was growing up, I felt like these, we were poor. We were struggling. We didn't have, so when we robbed or stole or did something or took something, just because legit we needed it. And I'm not excusing the behavior.
Right.
I'm just saying that a lot of us, a lot of the time, we were in more need than it was just, wanting being tough. It made us tough being in
Right.
need.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And
Yeah.
I think that when you present a young kid with an opportunity to make thousands of dollars, even though it might be wrong,
Yeah.
you're not looking at the wrong. You're looking at the come up. And that come up means that I might have to hurt a few people on the come up, but you know what? I have to take this opportunity, or what appears to be an opportunity, because you don't know any better.
Yeah, and I want to be clear to the viewers. It's not that we are not intelligent enough to understand that there may be consequences.
Right,
we are desperate enough that the consequences do not matter as much as the risk we're willing to take. I just want to be clear about that.
The reward definitely outweighs the risk. Because other than that,
man, then
so I can make $5,000 in a few hours just by standing out here doing this thing.
Right.
I'm willing to take the risk.
Right.
Because I don't have.
So you went from that, very, what I feel is typical thinking in the areas that we grew up in. I grew up in Dorchester, so very the next town over. And so that's a typical thought, right? Is that we're gonna get what we need to get. This is the opportunity that we're gonna present to ourselves because no one else is giving this to us. So now, what was it in your life that happened? Because most times it's triggers or some sort of event or something that kind of like shakes us up and either like scares us straight or puts us in a worse situation, right? So where was that transition for you? Because now you're a football coach, you're mentoring young boys, and do you mentor girls as well, or just you stay with boys?
Within school, yes, definitely. Okay. Any and everybody.
Okay. You do. So you're a football coach. So primarily right now it's the boys, but you will mentor girls as well. What was your wake up call? What was your transition? What made you say, let me get off this thing and get on to something better?
Well, the thing of it is, I was never really on that thing.
Okay.
You know what I mean? When I was about 7 years old, we moved down south to North Carolina. My grandmother had cancer at the time, and my mother wanted to be closer to her because of that. So we moved to North Carolina. Now, at 7 years old, my mother worked at Elizabeth City State University, which is a HBCU, a smaller one, a lesser known one. But if you are in the CIAA conference, you know who Elizabeth City State is. You know that. So my mother worked at the college, and that's where she met my stepfather. And after meeting my stepfather, I had opportunities to then become a ball boy for the football and the basketball team because he was an athletic trainer. Nice. So once, before that though, before I even get to that part, but that part's the part that really kind of changed things. But before that part, when I stepped on campus as a 7-year-old, I didn't know what college was really at 7. Who cares? I'm 7 years old. I'm just happy to be alive, running around. So looking around, I saw people that looked like me in this environment that I really didn't know much about. But my mother was telling me that, this is college. This is, she's explaining it to me. But I'm seeing everybody that looks like me, right? So visually, I'm already attracted to the situation because everybody is black. The president of the university, when I met him, he was black. The chancellors were black. The professors primarily were black. And it was just wow, this is Black utopia. The band, which was, HBCU bands, come on now, that was the thing. So the band was rehearsing. I'll never forget. The band was practicing, and the band was dope. Playing the hottest music of that time, and you got the cheerleaders, the majorettes, the drum majors were off the hook. So I'm looking at all this stuff, and then that's back when fraternities still had plots out on the yard to identify where their hangout spot was. So I saw the Qs, the alphas, and everything. I see people stepping. I'm like, wait a minute. I don't know how you get here, but I want to do this.
Right. You want to be a part of that.
This thing right here. Oh, yeah. So spending pretty much every day on campus, hours on campus, because, go check out moms, go harass her for 50 cents to go get some Krispy Kreme donuts out of the vending machine now. They sold and they were some of the freshest donuts out of a vending machine. So like I would just be in a drawer at work, scrounging up change, trying to get Krispy Kreme donuts, and just being around campus. So of course, being on campus and my parents working there, you know, I got to meet people, you know, that were really influential people. I didn't really think about how much at the time, because you're just kind of meeting people. You're like, yeah, okay. So I met the president of a college. All right, whatever.
Right, sure.
No, but you're
Just
like,
7, who cares?
you look back on that and you're like, that's not regular. Like that doesn't happen for everybody.
Right.
So, you know, after being around for a little while, like I said, became a ball boy for the basketball and football teams. And that's when I got to travel kind of with the team. And now I'm talking to other they were considered young brothers at that time, but they were older to me, you know, so, and they started to be people that I looked up to and I wanted to be like, you know, I wanted to emulate whatever they were doing, you know, whatever they were doing, I was trying to do, you know, and those relationships and that bonding and that talking about life and how you can, you know, better your situation, just being around positive Black people at that time. I didn't know how much that actually really meant. You know, meeting legendary coaches within that conference. You know, these people are like people that are well-known people, you know? So it's like, these people come over to my house for dinner. Like this is nothing really special because I see them all the time, but in the pantheon of what they do, these people are somebody, you know? But I just saw them as like my mother's friends, you know, or my stepfather's friends.
Sure.
So that influence right there really had the most profound impact in terms of like how when I moved back to Boston, I didn't really get involved in a lot of the other stuff because I knew something different already, you know, and my mother had some standards, which was like, I don't care about football. She told me straight up, I don't care about football. So whatever you do with that, you do with it. But I tell you this, if you make anything lower than a B on your report card, on a test, on a quiz, anything, you're off the team, period. I don't want no questions asked. So the standard was already set. Right. And prior to that, when I was in 5th grade, one of my teachers, Miss McCarthy, I'll never forget it, white teacher in North Carolina. Now, mind you, I'm going to keep repeating in North Carolina because people think that some reason that like Massachusetts is more progressive and people care a little bit more. No, I've been called the N-word more here than I ever heard it down there. Yeah. So, and this is based on my experiences. So clearly something's not right. Yeah. So this white lady wrote on my report card, Byron could be a straight A student if he applied himself. Like straight up, I can still see the ink on my report card. And I'm all the way home, I'm reading this and I'm reading it and I'm reading it. I'm like, man, you know, my mother ain't gonna be happy about this. Because at that time, you know, I was horsing around, you know, I was doing the work, but not doing what I was capable of doing.
Right.
So I asked her, you know, I was like, you know, what do you mean? So, you know, you have your parent-teacher conference or whatever. So I'm like, well, what am I doing that's not, you know, I do the work, you know, and she's like, yeah, but here's the thing. You complete your work and then you're like messing with your friends in the back of the class, you know, you're throwing paper at them, you know, you're spitting spitballs, you know, you're trying to get kids talking. Everybody's not where you are, you know? So if you're done with something, you can ask me and say, Miss McCarthy, can I have something else to do? You know, that way you're still learning and you're not interrupting those who might be working a little bit slower than you do.
Yeah.
You know, and so I kind of internalized that, you know, and I was like, you know what? Okay. I need to apply myself. All right, cool. From that point on, nothing lower than a B on anything that I ever did as far as school was concerned. And it's not that I was trying to be, you know, anything special, because I wasn't. I was just challenged by somebody who saw in me that I could be something different. Right. And I took a hold of that challenge and I was like, just out to prove her wrong. Like, okay, I didn't think about what it was doing to benefit me at all. I was just like, I'm gonna show her. I'm gonna show her. And
I want to say something really quickly too, because one of the things that I like to highlight is kind of eliminating the urban, what do we want to call these things? Like the things that we celebrate, the ignorances that we celebrate, right? And one of those things is, you just said something about not that you were trying to be better than anybody, right?
Right.
That just triggered something in my mind, because this is the type of injustice that we give to each other, right? Amongst one another, right? Like if you're intelligent, or you're making A's, or you respect your parents or other adults in the community, or you're articulate, or then you're trying to be better than something.
Yeah.
And so I want to just say something to that really quickly, and I want you to finish your story. I got to address it, Byron, because it irritates me. We should want, as a community, as a people, individually, to strive to be our very best. We should want to push other people, especially in particularly brown and black people that look like us, whether they're younger or older, that are trying to do anything. We should be pushing them towards that goal in a very positive and supportive way. It should not be about, oh, you think you're all that, or you think you're trying to be this other thing. So I'd like to just diminish that, or, reject the whole idea of celebrating that level of ignorance. This is part of the reason why I think personally that a lot of people, besides just, that slave mentality of thinking, transcending that thought, is a lot of people are scared of success because they fear what their own people, how we're going to be received by our own, more than anybody. And that's sad. That is really a sad thing to say out loud. It's a sad thing to admit. It's a sad thing to be true. But guess what? It's true. So if we're not checking ourselves, especially those of us who are of the mindset of growth and progression and wanting to be successful within our own selves, we have to be pushing the envelope for everybody else that's trying to get there. And we also have to feel pride and feel good about anything that we do accomplish and anything that we do well. We should feel good about it. We should applaud ourselves, because guess what? If you did something wrong, they'd be right on your back for that. Everybody be paying attention to that, talk about that. Let's talk about how much Byron jacked up. Let's talk about what Byron did wrong. Let's talk about what Byron, did that was so why can't we talk about what you did that was so right and so great and so good? I feel like it's a problem, and it's not just, you saying this story. I think it's, and you're laughing, and I know you're laughing because I know and I know everyone that's listening knows too, right? Because it's what we do culturally. It's what we do to each other.
Yeah.
Right?
We're the worst offenders.
So in your story, what I would like to do is take a minute to educate and say, hey, listen, we have to support each other, even in these small things. Even if you don't feel like, I know 13 guys that have t-shirt companies, right? I try to buy at least one t-shirt because, it's such a saturated thing. I be talking to them personally, like, why t-shirts, man? Like, so many people why t-shirts? But on a local, this is a t-shirt from a person that I support, so it's like on a bigger level, it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna still support it, but why t-shirts, bro? There's other things, but this is what we do, right? We still want to be supportive. We still want to try to help them push their envelope too, right? This is how we start bringing money back into our community. We start building awareness about who has what offerings in the community. So we don't have to go out and try to look for it elsewhere. We can put it back into ourselves, right? And we can excel in that way, and we can commend each other for that excellence along the way, right? All right, I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna get off the soapbox. I'm gonna let you finish your story. I just had to say that.
That's real though. Because honestly, I don't think about what I do. I just do it, right? Yeah. So I'm not thinking about, somebody might think this about me, or they're gonna think this about me. I'm not motivated by what other people think. I'm more concerned with what I think. Yeah. And I move from that place. What am I about? How do I feel about this? So I took her challenge personally. I didn't care about what anybody else thought about it, nor was I consciously thinking like, I'm going to be a better student now because I'm taking this challenge. Because at in fifth grade, I wasn't even thinking about that. It was just like, oh, you said I couldn't do something. Watch. You know, it was more of that than anything else, right? So so here I go off on, you know, this journey to become, you know, whatever I was trying to be at the time. So we moved back to Boston when I was 12, when I was in seventh grade. And I went to the Thompson Middle School at the time. You know, I grew up on Lorna Road, so it's like, you know, the Thompson Middle School, you know, you skip on across Morton Street and you're basically there.
Right there, yeah.
You know, you're basically there. So I went from a situation in North Carolina where it was like really more community oriented. People everybody kind of knew everybody, like even across the city, because it wasn't that big of a city. Like if you had family members that were somebody in the city, then you probably knew everybody, or everybody knew of you anyway. Yeah. So, you know, being that my parents worked at the university, it was like the center of all things Black in the community. Like everybody went to the football games. You know, everybody went to the high school football games. You know, everybody went to the track meets. Like no matter what it was going on, you had community support all around. Like even people that didn't like you, like the people with the Confederate flag on their truck. A football game, oh, you sitting side by side, high-fiving, you know, elbowing each other like, hey, what's up? You know, then after the game, they retreat to their corner. But it's real though. It's like, okay, I'm letting you know that like this is the extent of our relationship. It's not, they're not being phony about who they are. Right. We're cool here. Right. Outside of here, we're not. Right. I can function in that realm because I know how you feel. Up here, people laughing.
It's more, it's masked. Yeah, it's masked a little bit.
Laughing, smiling, and then call you all kinds of things behind your back. So it's like, I'd rather know where you stand and try to educate you otherwise than for you to pretend like you down with me and you're not. Yeah. You know, because I think
one of the issues with that, you know, because I actually see that same problem, and this is one of the things that, you know, I don't know if it's reparable at this point. You know, we would have to be really organized and really committed to creating a community, right? Because you have gentrification happening throughout the city, right, in different areas. And so now what I've realized is that there is no one community. Like before, you can identify the urban communities, Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, pretty easily in Boston. You might stretch it out to JP or Hyde Park a little bit, right? Now, Roxbury is very diverse. It's much more diverse than it ever was when we were growing up, right? And so we have all of these different types of things where there is no one community of people. There is no one pocket of community for Black people, not as predominant as it was before. So I guess my question or my challenge or my concern is, how do we put a group of people in a place that live in scattered spaces, right? Like how do we get them into one place of organization, of love, of peace, of hope, of progression? You know, one of the things that stood out to me that you said is that when you were 7, you got to go on campuses, right? So a lot for me, and I happened to not just go on campuses, but my mother, she worked for Amtrak, she retired from there. So I happened to just be able to travel a lot, but it was because of her job. So we was on the train for free. We was going to Atlanta, anywhere the train would take us, right? And it was such a great experience for me growing up because we got to stay in the sleeper cars. That joint's expensive, man. I tried to do that for my son recently. I said, oh, no. But, you know, me and my mom, my brother, we did it so much. Like I took it for granted. I didn't even think about what it costs, right? Because we could just go for free. But I always understood the difference in the fact that I was able to travel from a really young age versus people here specifically that didn't have an opportunity to travel in the way that we thought very differently. You know, and so you having an opportunity to go into colleges really young, what happens in that type of situation, and I'm not telling you anything new, but I'm just kind of building it out a little bit, is that our minds open up. right? And once you start seeing things, once your mind becomes open to something, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be astronauts, it could be whales, it could be, HBCUs, whatever, right? Once we are open to something, it's stuck there. It's not going anywhere. Like it's in our minds now. We see that is an opportunity for us. It is an option for us. And so this is what we want to start being able to identify for younger kids early, right? Like these options, these opportunities. And so I see a lot of groups organizing college tours when kids get into high school. I think that it would maybe even beneficial to do middle school tours, from a very younger age, and even have the parents come, because a lot of these kids, my son included, would be first generation college graduates, right? So it's like, well, let's put them in a situation early, inspire them early, because one of the biggest differences that I see is resources. You spoke a little bit about resources before. I love the idea of being in a community that is predominantly Black and brown, where we are middle class to wealthy, where we're given the same resources. I don't mind, I won't say segregation, but seclusion under those circumstances, right? It's all about it's all about the bread, though. Right? You give me the same amount of bread, and I'll stay by myself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm cool with that. You know what I mean? Just give me equal access.
That's what I'm saying. Equal access, man, and because that's the biggest thing. Like some of the deficiencies have to do with extracurricular activities that parents, especially single parents, just realistically can't afford. Just facts. Like, you cannot afford it. I hear so many times, myself included, about after school programs or any kind of student activities. It's $200 or better every single activity, right? So if you want your child to be involved in something, even Pop Warner football, like you want them to be involved in something, you want them to be a part of the community, you want them to get involved in things. And I know that there are some scholarship opportunities and things like that exist as well, which is really good. But these are the kinds of things that I feel like should be funded by the community, like a group pool. Dorchester has a pool, Roxbury has a pool, Mattapan has the same thing, right? Of funds that go in from communities, from the people in the community to support the kids specifically in the community. Now, whatever kind of programs or activities or field trips or games or whatever we are providing for them, that's up to the neighborhood, right? But I do think that if we're pooling money together, because I might not be able to afford $250, but I can give $30. And if 50 single mothers can give $30, right? Then that's at least 25 kids going and playing football, right? And so I think like that. But in order to have something set up like that or structured like that, there has to be somebody at the head of that, right? Operationally, understanding what all these roles are, what kind of money needs to be had, and all of these things. And so from your experience coaching football, what do you think is the greatest deficit in what these young athletes, or in your personal experience in your years of coaching, what do you feel is the greatest or most consistent deficit within these youths?
It's two things. One is we have to learn that if you are doing something for free in our community, people think that it doesn't have any value. And that's the problem. So I'm trying to do things. I'll give you an example. I put together a free football camp for a weekend, right? Kids come on Saturday and Sunday, they get training, position-specific training, they get to do some throwing. If you're a quarterback, you throw against pass coverage, things like that. So, and we got literally 2 handfuls of kids, right? Now, if I had to put, for $150, for 2 days, I would have got more people, but I also would have got, well, why is it $150? Right. So it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Yeah.
I learned in marketing, two things, right? And I want to finish your point. 2 things. One is when people don't understand your business, like what I've always been told in marketing, right? You don't sell your business, you sell your value. And I might be saying that wrong, but it's always about the value. And so you're making a really good point. Like if you did it for free versus $150, people would be complaining either way.
Right. And so here it is. I am a dude from the community that's doing something for free because I understand the dynamics and the mechanics of my community. So why would I want to charge you money when I coach football and I love what I do? So therefore, I'm willing to do it for free.
Yeah. I think one of the things is that we are oxymoronic in ourselves in the sense that a lot of us feel very entitled and in the same breath feel like we don't deserve nothing. Right? How you feel both those things at the same time?
For me, I've never been a guy who's thinking about like, oh, how can I come up off of my community? You know, my community has provided a lot of things for me that I could never pay people back for.
Right.
You know, so by me coaching, when I was coaching Pop Warner, somebody did it for me. So how can I actually watch little kids playing football and act like I don't have a debt to pay?
Right.
You know, because if it wasn't for people volunteering their time with the Mattapan Patriots, and before that, when I was living in North Carolina, my journey could have been different. I learned a lot from these Black men during that time. Right. We played in a predominantly white conference, and we got a lot of flack for that from people in the community. Like, how come you're not playing, you know, the Raiders, or you're not playing against Lena Park, or you're not playing against the Guilford Oilers? What we were doing was paving the way for future stuff, because when you get to high school, you're going to be playing teams from all over the place. It's not going to be Black world, more or less. You need to know what these people are doing and how to interact. And we experienced a lot of racism in that time. We're talking about, here you are. I mean, the youngest kids at that time, I think, was like 7 or 8 years old. Okay, so you're 7 or 8 years old. You're going to play against this team. Now, our team is predominantly Black. You're either Black or you're Latino at that particular time, right? That was our team, period. From the youngest boys to the oldest boys in the program, that's what it was across the board. We're going out to central Massachusetts at this time. Places like Westboro, places like Maynard, places like Holyoke, places like Springfield. Now, Springfield and Holyoke were comprised of teams that looked like us because of it was more diverse.
Areas,
but even still, we're playing teams in Worcester. So these are like, we're going out to these places. We had our jamboree in Dudley, Massachusetts. There's probably not that many Black people living in Dudley, Massachusetts right now. So we would get off the bus and people would just stop and stare for a couple of reasons. One, because we were the only Black team. Two, because we were disciplined like a champ. Like our coach said, do something. It was a boom, get in line, put your hands behind your back, let's walk. You know, we had our own little chant or whatever. We would do that, which was intimidating for them because that's not the norm in that community. You know, a bunch of kids making a whole bunch of noise about who they are. Okay. So we would get off the bus and kids would be like, is that Mattapan? You know, are you guys Mattapan? We didn't say nothing because we couldn't say nothing. Coaches was like, don't say a word when we walk through here. We're going to be disciplined, period. We walking with our head straight, head up, shoulders back, hands behind our back, looking uniform. Our uniforms were cool at the time. You know, we looked just like the New England Patriots of the time. That's what it was. Pat Patriot was on our helmet. We looked good walking through. And people just like in awe of like these Black kids from inner city Boston were like so disciplined. Not only in that regime, but on the field as well. Like, we didn't get a whole bunch of pushing and shoving and stuff like that. Yes, we heard the word nigger. We were called nigger openly on the field. You talk to the referee, no support there because they look just like them. Right. Trying to get us off our game. You know, walking through the line to shake hands. Dudes would actually spit in their hand and try to shake your hand after games. So then once that kind of stuff happened, our coach was just like, don't shake hands. Just walk by and just say, good game, good game, good game. And then if the referee says, why aren't you shaking hands? Because it's unsportsmanlike to shake hands. But I guess it's sportsmanlike to call little kids nigger on the field. But not shaking this team's hand after the game is somehow unsportsmanlike. Right. So this is the stuff that we grew up with. So that stuff had a profound effect on us. But we had these black men that were volunteering their time, taking time away from their families to make sure that we were doing something constructive and positive in our lives. And I could never repay those people for that. So giving back in this way, creating free opportunities, because I went on to college and I played in college. I played semi-professionally here in Boston too. So I have a point of reference with this football thing. Like, I want to give you all the things that I learned for free. And here it is, we got problems with people coming and people showing up because it's free. No, I'm doing it for free because I understand your situation. Right. Why would I want to charge?
One of the things that I wanted to say about the free thing, I think that sometimes when you have, it's weird, right? And I don't understand what that dynamic is here, because I think that you're absolutely right in how people, they devalue things when they say that it's free. But I think that it has a lot to do with that whole dynamic of community, like what we were talking about before. It doesn't exist here. Like you said, you experienced it in North Carolina, and you got even a level of support and encouragement from white educators. Boston's very different. It's a lot more cliquey. It's a lot more. Here.
You're not, who are you to be doing what you're doing? Right. Well, I tell you what, that's the problem. It's the problem, period. That's why I don't do the bio thing. I don't do bios, because who I am, where I come from is not important. What's important is what I'm talking to you about, what I'm presenting to you. Right. Then afterwards, you write the bio based on what you learned from me, because I don't toot my own horn in any way, shape, form, or fashion. That's all bios do, is they're like selling yourself to somebody else via words. Like, oh, I've done this, I've done that, I've done this. You know what?
I've never written my own bio ever in my life because of that same thing. I have such a hard time.
That's why I go by on Instagram, the anonymous nobody, because who cares who I am? That doesn't matter. It's about what I do. Who cares about where I've been to school? What you do? Like, a couple of people might care about that, but the audiences that I speak to, they don't care about that. Yeah.
Let's talk about that audience. Let's talk about your students and stuff. What do you think is, twofold question, the greatest impact that you've had on any one particular student or a group that you were coaching at one time? And what's the greatest impact that they've had on you, any one particular student or a group that you've worked with? Or just an experience period?
I'll start with what I've gotten out of being around them. A deeper understanding of where young people are at. We did things differently when I was the head coach at the Burke High School. We did things completely different than most high school football teams are run. The things that we were doing, people are just starting to talk to me about now. How did you do that? So we were way ahead of the curve at this time, and not because I'm some guru or whatever. No, I did it from here because I grew up in Mattapan. I knew what those struggles were for us when I was growing up in Mattapan. If I had a Byron Beaman at that time in my life, who knows what I could be president of the United States by now, probably, because there's somebody pumping positivity into me every single day. Someone who genuinely says every single day that he loves me, and he's not even related to me. Yeah. And not because he's saying it out of his mouth, he's backing it up with the things that he is doing for me. So it's not just, oh, I love you. No, before we start any practice or anything, if something happened in the neighborhood, fellas, before we forget football right now, I'm not concerned with that. I have you all in front of me right now, all 35 of you. Okay, listen, was anybody impacted by what happened last night? Did anybody know that individual? Did anybody know that person through somebody else?
Right.
You know, based on your own experiences with trauma, how did you sleep last night? Did you see people from your past that you might have lost in a similar situation? Did you see them in your dreams last night?
Yeah.
Was it difficult for you to sleep last night? Did you eat today as a result of that? You know, because forget football. I care about you as people first. Football is easy for me. It's easy to coach you in football. It's harder to get you to admit and talk about things that are hurtful for you. So we're going to create the atmosphere where this is the norm, okay? Because if you're feeling anything as a result of what you heard last night, that you are having a normal response to an abnormal set of circumstances.
That's right.
You know, and somebody has to be able to tell you that and also love you up.
Yeah.
And if you need a hug, I got plenty to give. You know, I'm not afraid of hugging you and telling you that I love you because you are me. When I look at all of you, I see the younger version of who I was and what I wanted for myself. So whatever I would want for myself, I want for you too. It's not selfish here. It's not about me. It's not about me or how I run the program or this or that. No. More people have to genuinely care about the young people that they are dealing with. You know, are they going to make mistakes? Yes. Because their frontal lobe is not fully developed. They're going to make impulsive decisions, and they're supposed to do that. So why punish them for being who they are? If we know this, that it's been scientifically and medically proven that those split-second decisions that they're making aren't because they're not intelligent people. The part of the brain that controls that isn't fully developed yet. But anytime we talk about young people, it's okay in the white community that that's true. But in our community, that can never be true. Like when little Pee Wee pick up a pistol and go shoot somebody when he's 15 years old, why are we still punishing him 20 years later for something that we know he made an impulsive decision on? You know, maybe his family structure was, these are all the things that they talk about white kids who do the same things, right? Well, you know, his parents were going through a divorce, but okay, he didn't even have no parents. He was living with auntie.
Right.
You know, both his parents died from a drug overdose. Okay. So now he hates everything associated with drugs. He hates talking about drugs. He hates drug dealers. All these things have happened because of what happened to him, but then we want to punish the black kid because that's an excuse. But when the white kid does the same thing, oh, I'm supposed to care a little bit more? No, it's the same set of circumstances. You can't have two situations for people. It's either right or it's wrong.
That's the laws for the same circumstances.
Right. So for me, the kids have given me so much more than I could ever say that I've probably even given them, you know? Because they always thank you, coach, you know, for this and for that. You know what I say? No, thank you. All I did was provide the atmosphere for you to grow.
Right.
That's all I did. I created the atmosphere for you to be more vocal about your feelings. I created the atmosphere where we could talk openly about things that are going on at home. Because you know I'm not going to call Child Protective Services on you because you talked to me about some things that maybe wasn't 100% the way it's supposed to be done. Your emotional safety, it was important to me. So yes, we put into place things like book group. Okay, how many football teams are reading a book together throughout the course of the season? None. I can tell you how many. Few, if any at all. And this was back before it was sexy to do it. Okay, we're not talking about now that people are a little bit more progressive. No, we were doing it then. That was the first thing I handed out when I became the football coach at the Burke High School. I came there with a box of books. And the kids probably thought it was T-shirts or whatever. What's the new coach? He gonna give
More
us
T-shirts.
He gonna give us a dope T-shirt to set it all off and everything like that. No, we've used a book, and it was called "Everything I'm Not Made Me Everything I Am," and it was written by Jeff Johnson. I don't know if you remember Jeff Johnson. He used to be a reporter on BET. He would talk about all the issues that had to deal with young people. Then he had his own little show there for a while on BET as well. But anyway, Jeff Johnson wrote the book, and he was a track athlete growing up. So it was basically him telling his story about how he became who he was by doing all the things that he wasn't about. So we used that book as a guide. You're talking about being on the same page as a team. Those are all coaches say cliche things like that all the time. We got to be on the same page. Okay, we were literally on the same page.
Right.
It was like, okay, we're on page 15, all of us, and then we would discuss the book openly. Like, okay, we read 2 chapters. Okay, let's talk about themes. What are we hearing? What's applicable to your own life? What did you hear that was new? What did you hear that was old? What was said differently? How are you planning on applying these things to your own life now that you know something different? And we went through that just like that. Fast forward, my assistant coach, who was a white dude by the name of Kevin Bowes. To this day, I don't care what anybody says. For this dude to be who he was and for him to get on board with the things that we were doing with no problem, no hesitation, no nothing. Because the requirement was, if we expect the kids to do it, we have to do it too. Right. This ain't about them telling their story to me and I'm over here. No, nobody ever had a pencil and a paper taking notes on kids. No, whatever was said, and after it was over, it stayed right in this room. Okay, plain and simple. So, but he was the one that said, Coach, when I was at High Park, we used to have team dinners on Thursday. What do you think about that idea? I love that idea.
That idea.
Cool. We're gonna also, since we have their attention on Thursday, everybody want to eat anyway. Let's put restorative circles into the process where we can talk about issues pertaining to the community, their own lives, trauma in their lives, et cetera, because everybody wants to eat and everybody wants their uniform for Friday. So that's what you got on Thursday. You got a circle, you got food, and you got your uniform to wear to school, your jersey to wear to school the next day, and everything like that. So those
because they were in a team. Did you find that the teammates were participating in that circle? Were they open to share and things like that?
That's the misconception about our people. If you don't give them the opportunity to speak, they won't. But if you give them the opportunity to speak, they will. And if you model what that needs to look like, cool. Because they needed to release this stuff. They're walking around with all this trauma in their body, and we're wondering why they're falling asleep in the middle of class. We're wondering why they're not eating. We're wondering why all these things, because if you're thinking about the basic survival every day, right? Then I can't tell you anything. I can't educate your mind. Your mind is already occupied with, oh man, when I leave school today, I gotta walk this way. I can't catch the 23 today because there's beef between such and such and so and so. The complexities of our young people's lives, we don't even think about. Right. Like we're thinking, okay, all right, you go off to school. Right. We don't even know what that journey to school looked like every day. Why are liquor stores open at 7:00 in the morning in our neighborhood? As little girls and boys are on their way to school, like they need to see somebody drunk and passed out in their neighborhood that early in the morning. You're stepping over people passed out in the street. Young girls being cackled at by grown men. Sometimes even touched by these same people. Like that's not cool. But we co-sign that in our neighborhood because we don't put parameters around that. Mm-hmm. I've always said there's an acceptable level of ignorance that we tolerate in our community. Period. Yeah. And until we get right with that, we can't point the finger at nobody else. We co-sign.
I think this is the beginning of that. I think this is the beginning of that get right, though. I think that generationally, right? I think that each generation, becomes stronger and better and greater as it should, right? So I feel like our generation is more, or at least mine, I think you're a little teeny bit older than me, but our generation is more like tired of hearing all the complaints. It's time to take action. You know, let's stop talking about it. Let's be about it. I think the generation under me are these young leaders and organizers that have been doing all these protests around these police brutality murders, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and these types of things. I think the younger generation are actually leading them. Super proud of the younger generation coming out and doing all this advocacy and work in these things. And I think it's going to be the generation under them, you know, so maybe my son's generation, that is actually going to see a difference, right? I think that there's a process. I think that there are people that say, oh, we haven't made strides, or we have so long to go, or we have such a far way to go. And then there are people saying, oh, we've come so far, right? I'm of the mindset that we have come a long way. You know, I won't say so far. I feel like we've come along, right? I do feel like we have a long way to go, though. You know, so I think that now there's more awareness, now that there's more desire, more commitment, more understanding, even around the level of ignorance or the depth of corruption, and, you know, that those in power kind of have over us, or the way that we've been separated and abused and disenfranchised and all of these things as a people. I think that now with technology, with people like yourself that have the heart of change, right? Because that's where it starts from. You know, if it's not in our heart, it's just like racism. You know, when we talk about the police brutality, say, well, what things need to be put in place? It's not just a training session, right? We need to figure out what the heart of these people are, right? Like, do you actually care about justice, or do you just hate Black people and want to hold a gun, you know, be licensed to carry? Like, what is your intent? You know, why do you want to be an officer of the law? Like, why? So I think that there needs to be changes systematically around, you know, determining intentions of people. You know, right now only God can understand our intentions, right? He's the only one that knows our heart. So there's no real way for us to understand it. But I do think that if there was a way, you know, you made a comment that was really profound to me, where it's like, you know, you're not doing it for the showy display of it, but it's something that you feel, it's something that's in your heart. I want to correct one thing in you saying that even though you don't want credit, I definitely feel like you deserve it. You know, I definitely feel like, and trust me, I get it, right? Because you provide a service based on a passion and a love and a commitment that you have. You're drawn to it. So for you, it's nothing. But understanding the amount of, like, if you just look at your own numbers, right? Look at the amount of kids that you've coached over the amount of years that you've been coaching. How many of those kids have grown up either without their father, without both parents, with one of their parents being incarcerated or on drugs, right? Like these four different scenarios repeat itself. And some people are dealing with all four of them in one, you know, like, so, you know, so, but it's a repeating situation. So if you don't legitimately care about that situation, and the truth of the matter is that we don't care about things that we don't know about, right? We don't know, we don't care. You know about it. You've been through it. Maybe not personally with the parents not caring and loving you, but, you know, coming from a broken home, you know, you said your mom remarried. She was, you know, she got a good guy that came in and showed you some things too, which is a blessing, right? And so all of these things, these kids on the whole, like 35, right? Every season, 80% at least of them are affected in one of those four ways that I just mentioned. And this is what you're coping with. This is what you're mentoring.
The thing is to eliminate the barriers.
Okay? What?
It's to eliminate the barriers.
Yeah.
But what I mean by that is, if I'm speaking about your situation, then you now in your mind, you're like, okay, he gets it. So, but if I never say it out my mouth, I know some of you are the men in your home. You're 15 years old. That's not your role, but that's a role that you're being asked to play. I get it. I understand that. However, when you come to school, you don't play that role in school. So when Miss So-and-so is asking you to do something, you're not the authority figure at that point in time. And it's really just like your wires are crossed, because in one situation, I'm being told I'm a man, but then in another situation, I'm being treated like a student I really am. And I know that that's confusing for you. But if I don't talk about that, you can't even process what's going on with you either. So my thing was to understand, and this is for anybody who is trying to do work, black, white, whoever you are, trying to do work in our community. If you don't first understand the dynamics and the complexities of our community, you can't help.
You'd actually be doing more of a disservice.
You can do some things that might be, in your eyes, productive and helpful, but you're not really helping or making the impact that you think you are, because you don't
You're not benefiting those kids.
Yeah, you don't understand it. Like, I grew up in the community. I understand what it's like to walk down the street and wonder, like, am I gonna make it home or not? I know what it's like to be really friendly with the people who run the local corner store, who knows every kid in the neighborhood and probably can tell you more about every kid in the neighborhood than some of their parents can. Because you come in there every day to either buy or occasionally steal chips, candy, and gum every single day, okay? This person gets to develop a relationship with you because you probably you learn more about young people in casual conversation with them than you will ever learn from them by putting them in a room and making them talk. They're not gonna talk like that. So
that's why I was asking you about the circle, like how effective it was, because I was like, most times when it's one-on-one, kids feel a little bit more, okay, I can kick it. But when it's a group, they feel a little bit shyer or a little bit more.
Because the adults are also talking.
Okay.
The expectation isn't for you to tell me, but I don't want you to bare your soul and all of a sudden I just bear witness to that. No, I'm gonna set it off with my own story that might sound eerily similar to yours, which is gonna make you say, oh shoot, Coach, I didn't know you felt like that. Yeah. So when I say things about the trauma in my life, like losing friends when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, okay, I'm gonna tell y'all a little story about this man that I knew who was a really good friend of mine that died, and the guilt that I felt about him passing, because I was supposed to come home from college that weekend, that day, that Friday. I was supposed to come home, but I didn't. I said, you know what? I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna leave Saturday morning, Okay, thinking everything was cool. Saturday morning, my mother calls me and she's like, yo, Philip's dead. And I'm like, Philip who? Just like you gotta give me more than that. You know what I'm saying? I know a bunch of people named Philip. Like, you need to be a little bit more specific. And then she was like, Vernon, your friend. And I just dropped the phone. And I felt in that moment responsible for something that I knew I wasn't responsible for. But I thought to myself, if I was home, he wouldn't have been in that situation, because we probably would have been hanging out around our old way, as opposed to him being around his grandmother's way at that time. But I felt guilty because I wasn't there. Not that I could have changed the outcome or anything like that, but it's just how I felt. And I know that many of our young people feel the same way. So by me telling them that, and I said, and let me tell you this too, guys, that every time a young person is killed in the city, I relive my experience that I had with each one of my friends that died the same way. I said, so here I am, 40-something years old at the time, still affected by what happened to me when I was 15, 16, 17. So I know and I share those same feelings. So when I hear about young people dying, my friends' faces flash across my face. Every single, not one time, every single time a young person is murdered in our community, that's what happens for me. And I want people to understand that, like, and I'm a guy who understands trauma, who gets it, who has worked with psychologists running groups with young people. So I have an insider perspective on how all this stuff works, but it doesn't change what happens in that moment. You
And
know,
it doesn't change your the way it affects you either.
not because I just Tuesday morning,
Right,
you know,
right.
a young man that was murdered in Dorchester. I knew Malik. Malik went to the school where I work. You know, I've had several conversations with Malik, talking about this or talking about that. Met his grandparents, wonderful people who are trying to do the best that they can to keep him in an environment that they knew was better for him, you know? But sometimes young people aren't ready for that yet. You know, sometimes it's a grooming process, if you will, that like sometimes the things that are going on in their head doesn't even match their actions. Like they don't necessarily want to be oppositional or things like that, but they got stuff going on. And if we don't get to the part that they got going on, then they end up doing stuff and people are like, wow, you know, I can't believe so-and-so did that. Well, you know, if you knew his story, you would understand that a little bit better. You really would.
And key words that you kind of said to me that made me think about some of the reasons why people go through this. You know, some of it's, you know, like you said, you felt guilt over your friend. Some people feel shame over even being aware, like if you knew the shooter, for example, you know, like there's so many different emotions that are around this, you know, and they're negative emotions, not positive ones, so it's not healthy, obviously. I definitely appreciate so much that you creating this platform, the level of passion that you have, that you've developed within your heart and soul, or that's been developed within you by God, because of your own personal experiences. I do believe that the most impactful teachers are people that have experienced and gone through the lesson, or know very firsthand what that lesson looks like. You know, I think that you're doing really, really great work. And we're going to do a final page on here so people can contact you if they needed to. But I just wanted to make sure that, you know, so some of the things that we talked about, and what I really enjoy speaking to you about is like these categories of, I guess, emotions, right? So we talked about shame, and we talked about guilt, and we talked about these trauma and the things that inner city kids go through. But then we also talked about communication. We talked about love. We talked about passion. We talked about hugs, right? And so this is the countermeasure for that trauma, you know. And this is the passion that you have in your heart. It's the passion that I have in my heart. This is what this show is all about, you know, being able to extend this to these youth that maybe don't feel like they have support, or don't know where to get support, or are looking for some way to find support or an outlet of someone to speak to. So Byron, I'm grateful to you and all the work that you've been doing over the years and coaching, and bringing people to not just have a self-esteem around themselves or value for themselves, but learning how to love themselves. I mean, it's the most valuable lesson that any one person can give to another is teaching them to love themselves, right? And that comes from you obviously understanding how to love yourself. And so we want to definitely acknowledge and recognize your parents in that, because they gave you that, right? So we definitely want to acknowledge them right now. But again, thank you so much for coming on the show and being a part of this journey in rebuilding our communities. Byron Beaman, everybody.
But you know, I'm just like I said, I'm just a dude from Lorna Road in Mattapan, you know, and seeing the things that I saw growing up, mixing those things with what the expectations were within my own house, within the walls of our own house, which didn't speak to a lot of the other things that I really didn't get heavily involved in. It wasn't that I didn't want to, you know, I'm not going to sit here and act like I didn't want to do those things, because it seemed like that was the thing that I was supposed to be doing. But the
is one thing.
The messages I was hearing other places within my home was like, no, that's not what you do, you know, and people can do those things. And it's like, people don't even understand the complexities of the relationships that people have who aren't doing those things with the people that do those things, you know. And people don't even understand that oftentimes, I mean, especially when we were growing up, it was a little bit different. Like, if people knew that wasn't your lane, they didn't try to make that your lane.
That's right. They respected it.
They like that whole peer pressure thing, maybe to a degree, but like if they knew, because back then we actually knew people's parents too. That You know, like we knew our friends' parents. So if they knew that, like, fundamentally your parents weren't those parents, they were like, nah, you don't even need to be out here with that. Like no, you know.
I got saved a lot because of that, you know.
Some of the best advice actually came from dudes on the block. You know what I mean? Because they were actually mentoring. We didn't call it mentoring then, you know, but
schooling you to something, putting you on to something.
Yeah, but you know, but it was that OG mentorship that's like, listen, I'm living this life. You don't want this. You got football, you got the school thing going on, you know, focus your energy over there, man. Like this is not where you want to be at. Now, people don't think that people like that exist in our neighborhoods, you know, but they do. These dudes don't want to see you travel down the same path that they traveled down. They already been there. They know what it's about. There's no mystery anymore. They demystified what's on the other side. Like, dude, I'm telling you, you don't want to be there. You know what I mean? Whatever it is that you're doing or thinking about, that's not what you want to do. So I want to thank all like the OGs in my neighborhood that was putting it down like that would actually throw you off the corner if they saw you standing on the corner too long. Yeah. And like, this ain't your lane. Yo, get off the block. Right. You know what I'm saying? Get off the block. Okay, cool. You know,
it's a respect for that. You know, people understood, and it's funny because I think I'm so old school. I still think like that. So when you're saying it right now, I'm like, oh man, am I old? Am I the only one thinking like that still? But but I tell my son that, you know, like you don't have to try to be anything. You know, be really good at being yourself and you'll be fine. You know, like be really good at being yourself.
Of the book, everything I'm not made me everything that I am. Right. And it's like, you don't have to be that. Just because we live around it and we're within it, that doesn't mean that we have to do the same things. Be a free thinking individual. What do you want for yourself? How is doing that going to make things harder for you to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish? But my thing too is like, hip hop music has an amazing ability to educate if we use it as an educational tool, which I do. Because if you listen to a lot of rappers, right, especially Mobb Deep at one particular time, you know, the infamous album was written by 18 and 19-year-old kids. We're not talking about mature adults. We're talking about people who have looked at their situation and said, oh, shoot, okay, I see what this is. Now, one of their songs calls On Survival of the Fittest. Prodigy says, at the end of his verse, he says, until my death, my goal is to stay alive. Not to be a doctor, not to be a lawyer, not to be a dentist, not to go off to college, not to be married and have a family. My goal is to stay alive. So if I stay alive long enough, then and only then will I begin the process of thinking beyond my reality. But my reality speaks to me and says, I have to survive every day. And here it is. I don't necessarily like the picture that I'm painting for you, but you need to understand that this is the thought process. Right. And if you get into the lyrics and stop thinking about, you know, the party and the foolishness part of hip hop, and really go back to the origins of why does hip hop even exist? What was hip hop really put in place for? Like the culture of hip hop, you know, which is DJing, MCing, breakdancing, and graffiti, right? People don't even talk about all the elements of it. We only focus on two right now, and really only one, which is the MC, period, right? No, because we don't talk about the culture of hip hop. Hip hop was started by young people in the Bronx to end gang violence. Right. We don't ever talk about that. Right. But we expect the younger generation to just respect the culture. How? When we don't respect the culture, we're respecting the culture because there was not a lot of money in it at first. Then when this money started to come, people got disillusioned by the money. Let's just be honest. It was no difference than when crack hit our community. When people started making money in hip hop, the culture part dropped. When drugs came into our community, the culture and the community part of where we live dropped off. Plain and simple. It's the same thing. And if you teach young people about both of those things and how the similarities are, they will be more inclined to not want to repeat that thing. But we don't talk about hip hop that way. You know, hip hop is not about partying and foolishness. It's an educational tool. Our people are the MCs. They're giving you our viewpoint. A 17-year-old Nas wrote Illmatic. A 17-year-old wrote that. Like, do you understand that most of those songs were written by a 17-year-old who now is being respected by some of the top universities in the country as like this lyrical and genius, more or less? You know, people are teaching his stuff. People are writing thesis papers on Illmatic, you know, from a kid who didn't finish middle school, really. So we're like, come on now, we really got to start taking our MCs and saying, you know what, they on to something. Jay-Z, people get Jay-Z confused all of the time, okay? On a moment of clarity, he tells you outright, I want to rap like Common Sense, but I sold 5 million records. I ain't been rapping like Common Sense. Because if the sense has that much in common, then I have to go with what makes sense. I can't help the poor if I'm one of them. So I double down my dollars. That's the win-win, because now I can give back to my community. I'm a billionaire now. So now I can do all the things that I want to do, but I can't do that if I'm trying to be this conscious rapper when I know that conscious rapping is not going to put the money in my pocket to make the changes necessary in my community. People misread stuff all the time because you're hearing it. And he even said that on Renegade. He's like, people said I only talk about jewels. Do you fools listen to music or do you just skim through it? Like, okay, if you pay attention to what people are saying and stop bobbing your head worrying about the production of a song, follow what people are saying.
I think it's important what you're saying, the message behind losing culture, right? And one of the things, I feel like our culture has never been truly established. So that's why the foundation is loose. You know, the foundation is cracked up. And so this is why we struggle with, we see it all the time, like people getting bought out from, selling out to the dollar, or, that's this shirt, right? Morals over money, right? Like we want to change the ideas on an individual level. And until that happens, the only thing, honestly, Byron, because I hear what you're saying, I think that it's an important message that you're speaking. I think that one of the things that I want to tell our listeners is to don't dismiss what he's saying. I think that dismissive behavior is really easy these days, like, oh, whatever, he's talking, because it's work to be mindful, it's work to be thoughtful, it's work to care, it's so easy not to, it's so easy to, be dismissive or turn the other cheek or just, not care or say it doesn't matter. It takes work to be that other person, but you do have to think about the goal, right? The goal is to have a strong community, strong individuals, strong family units inside that community. And so the way to accomplish that is to do the work. None of it's going to come easy. None of it's going to just magically just appear for us. We have to do the work. We have to have these conversations like we are now, have to get more people that are like-minded, on the same page, having the discussions, broadening the audience so that now we're actually taking action and we're moving on it.
Yeah, because I'll say this before we close up, that if you are leading and you are doing things and you're affecting positive change, it's going to be a lonely existence.
Oh, tell me about it, man.
It's going to be a lonely existence. But understand that you stay your course, because if you're doing it from a good place, eventually good things are going to happen. People don't always, people rejected Jesus at first, right? Because he came with the counter message that they weren't used to hearing, okay? And then they persecuted him for believing in the things that he was believing in. And then all of a sudden, okay, this guy's on to something. Plus, he schooled the 12 disciples, right? So that when I'm gone, you can carry this work on, right? So that's what we have to do. We have to each one teach one, because it's not about money. And I think that we have been poor for so long in our communities that when we want to make money, we take money over everything. Like our morals, we don't have them because we're in the pursuit of money all of the time. Okay, why are you pursuing that money? Like, okay, now that you have it, what are you doing with it? You know, are you really satisfied in your life? Is your life more fulfilling? No, because I'm gonna tell you like this. I've probably been happier with no money than I've been with money. Yeah. You know, because I know that like when you start getting stuff, you start like, okay, well, I could buy this, or I could get this, or I could get that. And you know what? And it's not even about obtaining stuff that doesn't even have any real value, you know? Because at the end of the day, kids need to understand that when you buy a car, all the car is a depreciating asset. And they need to understand what depreciation is, and they need to understand what an asset is. Right. Like buying a home, an investment. Buying a car, not an investment. See, so it's because the car is giving you nothing in return except maybe you feel better about yourself because you're driving around and people are like, oh, you see so-and-so's new car? Or you see that bag he's carrying? Or you see that? You see this? No. When you see me, 9 times out of 10, something that I'm wearing is probably from a thrift shop that I've just put stuff on to make it look different, but I probably only paid $5 for it. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, you got to be creative, and you got to be creative in the way that we do things, and we have to be creative in the way we just move our community forward. There's no one way to do it at all, but I think that sometimes people feel like there's one way to do it, and it's not. Right. You know, there's multiple ways to do it, and we have to build coalitions. If I have access to a certain space where I know my friends know more about certain things than I do, it's my job to connect them to that resource that I'm also benefiting from. So it's not about Byron. No, it's about, oh, how can I bring Mike into this? Yeah. You know, how can I bring Martin into this? How can I bring my man Jose and my man Mariano into this? Because I'm not the expert at certain things. Yes, I can do those things, and I know enough about it to do it. But why do that when I can also share the pie with them? Like this is the dude you want to talk to if you're talking about restorative justice, which is my man, J.D. Fergus. Yeah. So if you want to know about restorative justice, he works for the Center for Restorative Justice. So clearly, like, yeah, I've learned some things along the way, but he does this on a level that I'm not doing it. So I want his expertise. You handle that. I'm going to handle these coaches over here because that's my area. You know what, Mike, we need that whole wellness piece around yoga to work with our football team. Okay, you do that part. I'm going to do the part that I'm good at.
Yeah, see, it's all about collaborative measures, man. Like that. This is the only way that we're going to grow. It's the only way that we're going to
plain and simple, right? So if I have access, people that I know that are experts in their field, oh, you best believe I'm going to talk you up because it ain't about me. You know, I'm going to get my piece of it, but you're going to get a piece too. Because I want to share this. Like, and then we can all sit back and be like, man, remember that time when we all was in our own isolated spaces feeling alone? look at us now.
No, that's right. Byron Beaman, everybody, man, on Engage, Motivate, and Elevate. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I truly, truly appreciate talking to you. You have a wonderful, wonderful spirit. Your energy is really good. I hope that you guys are really taking it in, understanding what kind of heart condition this is. This is real passion here. This is something that it resonates with me really strongly. It's the same level of passion I feel for the community, and I feel it with you too. So thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show, Byron. I'm super grateful.
Thank you. I love my people, and I love Mattapan, Massachusetts. 02126. Yeah, man. Love our forever. Don't ever. Fellas, I know sometimes I don't see you, but I love you. That's all you need to know.
And for more information, to get in touch with Byron, make sure you just check out the final page on this. I'm your girl, Monet Fox, and stay tuned in for the next episode.
It is now time to elevate.
Time to motivate.
Let's engage. It is now time to elevate.